We're standing right here, close to where the Americans would have landed on the early morning of April 27th, 1813. The initial engagement between the Americans and the defenders of York was an important moment in the Battle of York, and is that event that we are commemorating with this plaque, which we will unveil momentarily. We'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Boulevard Club in funding this particular plaque project. Finally, I'd like to invite Janelle Giandro from ScotiaBank to speak. Last year, ScotiaBank began partnering with Heritage Toronto as our plaques and markers sponsor, and it has been a pleasure to have a corporate partner that so clearly shares our passion for local communities and the importance of honoring our past for the sake of building a better future.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Each and every plaque that Heritage Toronto produces is a community-building event. The plaques themselves are touchstones of the people who have shaped the past and an opportunity to tell the stories that shape who we are today. So, please join me in congratulating Heritage Toronto on recognizing the 200th anniversary of the Battle of York with this plaque.
Invite Janelle, as well as Peter Tomlinson, and Mike Babin of the Boulevard Club, as well as Carolyn King from Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation to unveil the plaque.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And since we have a wonderfully large crowd this morning, and the text is not large enough for everybody to see at the back, I'll read what it says. The Battle of York, an engagement in the War of 1812, commenced in the early morning of April 27, 1813, when about 2,550 American soldiers and seamen began their assault on the town of York, now Toronto, the capital of Upper Canada. They landed in boats near this site. The Americans were met by about 60 Anishinaabe under Major James Gibbons, who fired a deadly volley into the 1st Rifle Regiment, the first company to come ashore. This regiment was reinforced by 3 other American companies, led by Brigadier General Zebulon Pike, allowing the attackers to regain their composure and force the Anishinaabe into the woods. A company of the British 8th Regiment of Foot joined the battle. Although outnumbered 3 to 1, they fired a volley and charged into the enemy ranks, driving them into the lake. However, constant fire from American troops and warships finally sent York's defenders eastward in retreat. The American forces pushed on to capture Fort York and to victory in the battle. So, Richard Gerrard. Richard, now pass this along to Richard Gerrard.
I'm Richard Gerrard. I'm the 1812 historian with Fort York. What would you see if you were standing on this spot looking into Humber Bay at 7 a.m. on the 27th of April, 1813? Well, to start, most of you would be standing waist deep in the lake. It's not a very nice thought. Dry land, consisting of a narrow beach and a 3 or 4 meter bluff, would be somewhere behind you, about in the middle of Lakeshore Boulevard. In front of you, you'll be able to see the 14 vessels of the American flotilla, riding at anchor. They moved here beginning about 6 a.m., repositioning for their landing from their overnight anchorage just off the Toronto Islands. The location of the overnight anchorage caused the British commander, General Roger Helshafe, some concern. It meant the real possibility that the Americans would land both west and east of the town, cutting off his retreat both to Burlington and to Kingston. But we know the Americans didn't land to the east. History gives us that. And so what you'd see now are American soldiers on those ships. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers. They'd all be preparing to transfer from their transports into smaller flat-bottomed scows and bateaus that were to be used as landing craft. And in short, the Battle of York would be starting. But for the 1,800 American soldiers and the 800 sailors and Marines, the invasion started about a week earlier at Sackett's Harbor, New York. President Madison had issued orders for the invasion of Upper Canada in February, and by mid-March, General Dearborn and Commodore Chauncey had formulated their strategy for the 1813 campaign, and it took to mid-April for them to assemble the necessary troops and ships at Sackett's. They had been on the boats for about 5 days in April on Lake Ontario in a spring colder and wetter than the one we've been having this year. And for many of them, it was going to be a long day, and breakfast was probably the only meal they would get before it was over. And for dozens of them, it would be their last. So now it's about 8 a.m. on the 27th of April, 1813. The first wave of about 300 men of Forsyth's rifles and the 15th Infantry are beginning to pull in towards shore. But here my part of the story ends. I'm Richard Gerrard. I'm the 1812 historian with the Museum Services of the City of Toronto. We are standing on the site where on the 27th of April 1813 the Americans landed to ultimately capture the town of York. It's one of those ironies of history that we are commemorating a battle that we lost. Yeah, it was bad news for York. The Americans weren't very good guests when they were here. They burned the Parliament buildings, they burned all the military buildings, they took away all of the military and naval stores and looted a lot of houses in the town. And it was upsetting for the American commanders. It was, kind of them. They finally put all the Americans back on the boats about the 1st of May and sailed away on the 7th.
Wow. And so if it was 200 years ago today, I guess it would have been 1813.
Correct.
But it's connected with the 1812.
Right. This would be the second campaigning season for the War of 1812. The Americans did not really well in the first season in 1812 proper. They lost at Queenston Heights and Detroit. They were trying to do better this year, and the attack on York was the beginning of them actually doing much better than they had the year previous.
And were any Americans invited today, or?
Yes, it's going to be a rededication of a plaque that was installed at Fort York in the 1930s by the Daughters of the War of 1812 to the fallen Americans. It was joined at the time by one to the fallen British, and there'll be a new plaque unveiled today for the fallen First Nations warriors.
And so this is the spot where the landing was, or?
This is as close as I can put you onto the spot and not have you hit by a car.
Great. And the last thing I was wondering, just because we're with Toronto Truth Seekers, is there any truths about this whole situation or the landing at York that haven't gotten out in the history as much, or?
We have found new evidence to tell more details about the battle. But no, we've been telling the story for 200 years. The basic narrative is actually quite well known. What we're beginning to do now is put some flesh on those bones.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Richard.
All right, thank you.